Look at that. If you can't tell, I am, we're starting to move out. This is the last video to be filmed here. That's so crazy, I think. I mean, maybe I'll have time to film one more. But stuff is getting packed away. Took all this stuff off that's coming down so I can patch those holes. It's crazy. Speaking of the fact, first of all, hi, my name's Al, or Little Star Nerd. Welcome to the video. Speaking of the fact that I'm moving out, I am trying to move as little as possible from this location to my home. Part of that is trying to sell out my freaking Etsy store. So, I'm sorry I did that. I made some mystery bags. Thank you guys so much for your excitement in buying them. I've already sold out of 3 of the listings, but there are still extra smalls and smalls. I just was using whatever bags I had, so they're packaged a little bit differently. But extra smalls have 2 postcards, 2 stickers, they're $4. Smalls have 3 postcards, 3 stickers, they're $6. But they're not, because I'm doing a sale on everything in the shop. 30% off your entire order. More details will be on screen, I guess. Not that there are more details needed, but I guess the dates of when the sale is happening. It is live right now. Please consider going to my shop and buying something. There are a couple of things that I just have a lot of still. Enamel pins, each kind of enamel pin I have certainly more than I want. There are a couple of stickers, the seagull sticker, like a lot of the very popular stickers I have plenty of. So if you've never bought something, and you've always went like, now's the chance, go buy the thing that you've been eyeing so I don't have to move it home. You will be doing me a huge, huge favor in doing that. So yeah, 30% off your entire order. There's no dollar minimum, just help me get rid of this stock. One more thing really fast. You've probably heard me mention this multiple times, but I was hired to illustrate a graphic novel. And not only is that graphic novel complete, but it is officially available for purchase. It is called The Hottest Fires of Hell. It's about a group of women in Europe fighting in the underground resistance in World War II. And the author is great, and I'm really proud of it. If you're interested, if you're intrigued, there will be a link down below. Yeah, really cool accomplishment that I needed to share with you. Okay, today we're doing some more sketchbook work. Look at this cute little sticker. This has been on it for a while. I don't know if I've showed you though. My friend got it for me from a local bookstore. We're just doing some sketchbook work. I'm obviously not trying to do stuff outside of my sketchbook while I'm moving and trying to get rid of stuff. So we're not doing like any separate pieces. And we're just gonna do some good old-fashioned classic Pinterest drawings. Specifically, I plan on using Pinterest photos as references to draw my OCs, because I'm trying to do art as a hobby again, and part of that is enjoying my characters, which I always find embarrassing to do on YouTube, but we're gonna do it. So just good old-fashioned, marker stuff. So classic stuff. Grab your own sketchbook, work with me. It'll be very chill, very fun, very relaxing. Take some time to do your own fun stuff. I'm really rambling, so let's just get into the art. Let's go. Before I get into it, I do want to apologize if my voice sounds really hoarse or difficult to listen to. I was on my run this morning and was doing speed intervals while it was very cold and windy, and I started wheezing really badly, and I still feel it in my lungs, so my apologies. So let's chit chat a bit about this spread. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to say, because I'm not doing anything new here. I'm not trying out any new supplies or techniques. It's all very standard stuff that you've seen from me plenty of times before. But I do think that it's been a while since I've done a spread anything like this. Actually, I just looked it up, and the last time I made a video on YouTube about drawing my own character, like any character, was a year ago. That's a really long time. It definitely has not been a year since I've done marker and color pencil drawings. It hasn't been a year since I've used Pinterest in any way, but it definitely has been a long time since I've done a video specifically just like this. In fact, even get that video from a year ago out of your head. The last time I did a video that is directly comparable to this one, not just drawing any OC, but drawing these ones in particular with this type of reference. The last time I can find it on my YouTube is 3 years ago. That is a really, really long time. I might be wrong. It might be sooner than that, but oh my God. It is funny to me because back before YouTube, when I was just on Instagram, these characters were kind of like my thing. They were all I drew, not explicitly, but they were a large majority of what I drew. I used them as stand-ins for myself because I wasn't showing my face or using any sort of my real identity at the time. It is not at all as if, you know, I or these characters were famous in any way. But I do think that they were kind of like my identifying feature as an artist online. That's my memory of it. My artist identity was definitely tied very, very closely with these characters and their story. And they are, in a way, kind of where my art journey started. You know, I started practicing art more regularly because I wanted to be able to draw characters like these. I wanted to draw people like these, and I wanted my own characters like I saw other artists had. And they were the first original characters I ever created, except for perhaps Sad Boy. He might be the very first. But in terms of characters who have a story, these were the first ones. And they were first showing up back in like my first or second real sketchbook. So in a lot of ways, you know, these little characters are kind of the reason that I'm here at all. So it's strange now to think that it's been so long since I've done anything more than doodle them. There are lots of reasons that I don't use my own characters in any sort of real way online anymore. Back in my earlier days, I was definitely worried about like theft and copying of characters, which I now realize that to be a pretty silly and petty concern for me in particular, for me personally, because I just wasn't doing anything with these characters that would require me to protect them in any way. It was also really personal. So as my audience grew and more eyes were on these characters and the art I would make with them, it felt weirder and way harder to be honest or do anything like real or sincere with them. I often used them to vent about things, but once people knew who I was or, you know, that I had friends following my account, I couldn't post anything that I didn't want them to know about, right? Like I didn't, I mean, it's not like I was doing anything crazy. It was just kind of like having an anonymous diary and then having that diary now published and people knowing who you were. It just became harder. And it got more embarrassing. You know, it did feel weird to let people know that my art, you know, when someone's like, yeah, I'm an artist, you're expecting, you know, there's a specific thought that comes to mind. Very, you know, typical Paris, right? It was embarrassing to like, when people be like, oh, can I look at your sketchbook? And oftentimes, you know, more often than not, my art was just little drawings where I make boys kiss. And like, even now I'm like cringing to say it out loud. You know, that was hard to explain. And I did also feel that I needed to explain that. And it made me feel like a weirdo and it was embarrassing. Then as I was on YouTube, it became embarrassing just in the sense that I had sort of shifted art spheres. I had definitely started in a more traditionally cringe art sphere, which I do say with the utmost respect. You know, on Instagram, it was a very different place. And then over time, as I was kind of growing in audience and kind of growing as an artist, I was less in that sphere and more in an aesthetics-driven, almost like art ho-esque world where original characters were really not much of a thing. Traditional fine art was way more emphasized. And I also say that with respect. I love and enjoy both of those spheres, and I have a genuine interest in making both of those kinds of art. But my YouTube channel, while not entirely uncringe, you know, there are definitely moments that I talk about, you know, those kind of typically cringe things, and that's great. My YouTube channel was still different than where I had started. And now any art I made or anything I talked about was undeniably tied directly to me, my name, and my face. You know, I start every video with me talking to the camera. So anything that comes after that, it's clear, it's clear who did it, right? And the embarrassment of talking about my little characters and this little world I had made up and all of that comes with it, it just felt like too much. It felt too personal and too weird. So to this day, I very rarely talk about my characters on YouTube, and by extension, they're rarely talked about on Instagram anymore either. Of course, I still do the Pinterest character design videos, and somehow to me, those are very different, mostly because there's a real lack of personal weight in those stories and characters, and their original concepts aren't driven by me, and therefore don't serve as the same kind of peek into my psyche like my own characters do. Naturally, with this distancing that happened because of the contentness of my art career, I definitely started to lose interest in these characters. The connection that I once had with them wasn't really there anymore because I was just rarely drawing them. There was nothing to kind of cultivate, that, I don't know, like love for them, right? And that was fine. I've said before that I don't think my social media or online art career really swayed the art that I made in a negative way. And I definitely do think that it swayed the art that I made, right? Like I definitely took paths and stepped away from things specifically because I was influenced online. But I was still always making stuff that I was interested in and wanted to make. So during that time that I didn't care about drawing like fan art and my own characters, like I had started out doing, I was trying out new mediums and doing landscapes and animals and more finished paintings and doing all these other things that I genuinely was interested in branching out into. And I was finding that I just didn't really have the time or kind of creative bandwidth to prioritize and emphasize all of those things. It's happened as well with my portrait art. I have said that I think portrait art is my bread and butter, but there was a good period of time where even now, I very rarely do portraits because I am interested in other things and I don't really have the creative time to balance continuing to do a bunch of portraits and also do all these other things that I'm interested in. But it's not just because of my art career going in a different direction that I let go of these characters. I think it was kind of the nature of the characters. Well, I know it was the nature of these characters as well. I originally created these characters like fresh out of high school, and these characters were high school age, and their story was very much based around being in high school. Like I already said, I also used them to like vent and just work through hard things that I was going through, kind of like a diary talking about what was going on. The older I got, the less I related to and cared about high schoolers, you know what I mean? I also just got like a lot happier and I had less stuff that I needed to vent about. And I had friends to talk to about my problems rather than having to just do it by myself. The fact that these characters were so young was like the real kicker. That was the real problem. I struggled to care about them in the same way because they were now so unrelatable to me, which had been the entire original point. It was that I was kind of vicariously living through these characters. But I also struggled to adapt the characters, specifically their story, to something more age appropriate. Their story was so focused on like being a teenager, dealing with teenager issues, that didn't seem super transferable to anything else. Those are pretty unique struggles. And I also didn't have any other stories or themes that I really wanted to explore because, again, creatively, I wasn't really in the storytelling space. I was practicing landscapes, right? So I was kind of just at this standstill with them. I couldn't reconcile with the characters as they were, and I couldn't figure out how to make them different. But over the past year or so, probably longer, I've really itched to get back to them. I've talked about it in art goal videos. It's partially why I started the Pinterest character design challenges in the first place. I thought maybe if I can't get back to these old characters that I loved so much, I can learn to make new characters that I will love maybe even more. But to this day, I have yet to make any other characters that feel as real and substantial and important to me as these older ones. So I wanted to get back to them for a while now, but I just never really had that time or energy, right? Like I always had other stuff that I was focused on, emphasizing. Not to mention, I've been really slacking with sketchbooks lately, as we all know. And when I did do sketchbook work, it was usually for a specific reason, and that reason was never to work on my own characters. It was always something else. But this year, my number one priority is to get back to experiencing art as a hobby again. And I'm basing a lot of that on my, I think like second-ish year of doing art, where I had just started my Instagram account, which is very flawed logic. And I'm very aware of that. I've talked about this a lot, but that time of my life was like not great. And my relationship with art was not great. The only reason I progressed a lot in that time and I, did really well on Instagram. And the only reason is because I was doing a lot of art because I literally was doing nothing else at all at that time. But it is still kind of my only example really of having any time in my life where art was a genuine hobby that I had spent more than 1 hour a week on and was getting enjoyment from. So it really is kind of my only reference point for what it's like to be getting that genuine enjoyment out of art. And a huge, huge part of that enjoyment was thanks to the characters. So I've been making a very concerted effort to reconnect with that part of my art. If it doesn't work, if the moment is really and truly gone, that's fine. I do still want to try to rekindle something similar, right? But I don't think it is dead. I don't think it is gone. And I think it's a very comfortable part of my art. And that's a really great place for me to go back to relearn how to have fun. You know, it's kind of like going back home when, you know, you're struggling in life and you have to move back home with your parents into your childhood bedroom. That's what this feels like to me. So that's what we're doing today. I've been thinking about these characters for a few days, and I think I'm getting close to figuring out a satisfying story that brings them way up in age, so they're no longer children. And it's also kind of a meaty enough story. Like, the problem with these characters that I faced pretty much since day one is the fact that they're just like people in real life. There is no element to this that provides anything of substance. So, you know, when their story was based on just like kind of what it's like to be in high school, I didn't know what to do with these characters outside of that context. I feel like I'm kind of figuring out possibly like a different story that I would like to tell, or things that I find interesting themes to explore, kind of giving some meat to the bones rather than just aging them up and having them exist in a void. I also think that I'm narrowing down on some like fuzzy ideas, better fleshing out characters that had previously been half-baked. And it does feel really, really nice to come back to this part of my art that has been here since day one. So to kind of more specifically talk about this actual spread, this is the exact kind of stuff that I used to do in my sketchbooks all the time. I would use a Pinterest photo as reference and then use it to draw my own character or like fan art of something. It would result in these really fun, cool spreads. I would get really creative with it, you know, washi tape backgrounds, you know, back when I would put a lot more energy into my sketchbook. Nowadays, I feel like I don't really do specifically this anymore. I will either reference a Pinterest photo directly, or I'll go out and search for a base reference photo from a different source when I plan on using it for like a character or something, right? Like, I don't really look on Pinterest unless it's like a stock photo kind of pin, if that makes sense. So this does feel like I'm going back. It's not like I've never done this, right? I do using Pinterest photos in this way is not exclusive to OCs like this, but it does feel like a specific thing that I'm going back to, which is kind of fun. I really like doing this method of finding a pin as a reference and then superimposing your own character. I have said this plenty of times, and I do think it's true, that I'm not super creative, and I do really struggle with character design. Not only their physical design, that's a major struggle for me, but also kind of figuring out the depths and personality of a character, kind of the nuances. I might know their main motivation, and I think I'm good at kind of coming up with a general plotline, storyline, or world building, but coming up with, like, really fleshing out a character, I find really hard. So creating a Pinterest board and then slowly honing that, refining that, makes that a lot easier because it feels tangible, easier to keep track of, and I can have like visual examples of what I'm creating and building. And then it's really easy to be like, oh, like find a photo and be like, oh, this is so that character. Like, let me draw him like this in this pose. It's like getting to know your own characters, right? Like, you can put them in these very real and personifying poses and situations, and it's like you're bringing them to life rather than just having to constantly use the limited like pose bank that you have in your head. You can do something really silly and specific that you find a pin of, and it definitely kind of makes your character more realistic, I think. It was very, very fun to do this spread today. I'm not satisfied with every drawing I did. I really like the first one. The first couple, I guess. The others, I think, it could be worked on. I'm definitely rusty, both in this kind of stylized / realism drawing, but also in my familiarity with these characters and their faces. In fact, some of these characters, I'm still not sure. I have never been sure on what they look like. Quite a few of these drawings turned out very odd looking, just not to my satisfaction. But drawing this spread definitely created a spark of renewed interest for me. And I've been thinking about these characters a lot since finishing drawing them and chipping away at the new story. It feels like a really good start to a goal that I've been just trying to get any sort of grasp on for years. So that's really exciting. Anyways, I don't really have anything else to say. I feel like I've been rambling a lot about a lot of nonsense just in attempts to fill the void. I guess one thing I do want to say is I'm trying to embrace the whole to be cringe is to be free thing, specifically with my art. I want to make whatever art I want to make, and I don't want there to be anything holding me back, whether it's social media, embarrassment, whatever. And the enjoyment I got out of this spread is a great reminder of why that's so important and why that's so worth it. So I'm going to shut up. If there's any art left, I'll let you enjoy it in peace without me yapping. Thanks so much for watching and listening to me ramble. I hope you're getting some chill, self-indulgent art of your own done today. I'll see you on the flip side.
Bye.